Hey Challenge A families, hope you're having a good week. Here we are in week 13 of 15 this semester. So I wanted to briefly let you know what we did in class, as well as talk a little bit about Blue Books. So in class for logic, we shared some problems. We had several students that shared multiplying with decimals. We worked with some fractions. They have some good vocabulary going. It was a good time. In Latin, we began discussion of verbs. So I sent you a little text as we did a comparison between what we have learned thus far about nouns. Nouns are in declensions. We decline nouns. We talked about adjectives, how adjectives match the noun, in what way. And then we talked about verbs. Verbs are in conjugations. You conjugate a verb. So just tried to get down some grammar there by comparing those. We also talked about when you decline a noun, we drew that framework. And then we talked about when you conjugate a verb, we drew that framework. And then we compared the two and how those are different. So it was a good discussion. They really hung in there. What I'd like for you to do is I sent you a screenshot of the board. That should have made its way into your child's brain. Now, look at that and see, were they able to copy that? I think the first step in attending to an instructor and taking notes is just strictly getting it off the board, whatever they have put in front of you as being important and being able to record that. Obviously, we're nowhere near being able to just listen and write notes on our own, but I think this is an important community skill to work towards. So you can kind of check in with your student and see how well they did in that regard. Science fair, we continue to move forward talking about our research and our hypothesis. Now, some of the students still don't have a real good grasp as to what they're doing in this in their science fair project. And this week is when they're supposed to write out the procedure. So hopefully I think a lot of that will come together this week. But please make sure that your student is not doing a demonstration. This is not a demonstration to show what happens when these two things react. This is an experiment more along the lines of what is the effect of heat on the elasticity of a rubber band. Not demonstrating this is what happens when you heat up a rubber band. Okay. So science fair, rolling right along. Remember, look in your appendix, read the guide every week. Make sure that you are going through the guide with your student, reading everything that they are to do at home, and then also looking towards what will happen in class. Don't forget about the appendix. The appendix has all kinds of information about science fair as well as that timeline. Make sure you're following the timeline. In reasoning, we talked about fables. We wrote a fable. I'm sure you've heard about that. It was quite stellar. And in exposition, we took parallelism to the next level. And this is really something that's emphasized in the later years as they move on up to Challenge 2, especially being able to write with parallelism. So we gave some examples of how you can. We actually went back and used our analogies book where we talked about parallelism, and we talked about how if you have 3 proofs, if you can write those in similar form, then you can pretty easily arrive at parallelism using phrases or clauses. So we did a little practice in that. And then in debate, I gave the students a map that goes all the way through. It's the Western Hemisphere and then Europe, what we've done so far, and everything was labeled with a number, and they just tried to identify as many of those places as possible. I went through and looked at your students' maps. One student didn't have their book, but I went through and looked at maps. Do that. Look at your students' maps and see if they have labeled it that this is Canada. This is the United States. This is the Western Hemisphere. Make sure they have a compass rose on their map. Also make sure they're doing maps. So at this point, we've had 12, we're in our 13th week. So we've had 12 weeks of drawing times 4 a week. That's 48 drawings. So, you know, give or take there, obviously. That's would be the expectation of the amount of practice that your child has put in at this point on drawing maps. So try to help them along with some accountability there and make sure that they're doing a good job with their maps, that they're not just drawing the map, that they're labeling them, that they're working through some real understanding of where these places are in the world. So I think that does it. Week 13, here we are. So have a good one. Let me know if I can help you. I've answered a few questions about verbs in Latin. So let me know if I can help in any way. I'll be glad to do that. I'm also going to send you a video on Blue Book. Have a good one.